Here we are, team. Hey, welcome along to the Wealth Plan book tour. Now, little housekeeping. We've got some people standing at the back. Raise your hand if you've got a free seat next to you. I see a lot of free ones. Now, people who are standing, I see you two at the back. You're not staff members. Keep your hands raised if you got something next to you.
But what if they want to stay together?
Yeah, well, they might want to, but we can move people around. Look, they're intelligent people. They knew how to... We've got three. We've got three. It's like an auction.
Oh, 3 seats. I thought.
Yeah.
He said row 3.
No, he said 3. We've got 3.
All right.
Oh, it really is like this. Now, if you guys are standing and you want to find a seat, there's a couple dotted around. First of all, we want to say thank you so much for coming along to this book tour tonight. This is just the first stop on our pretty much sold out book tour around 5 different spots. We're here, we're in Wellington, we're in Auckland, Queenstown tomorrow night, and Havelock North next week. And we are really excited about this, and we've got a great night in store for you. Now, has everybody got their books? Fantastic. Now, one of the annoying things, and they don't tell you this when you write a book, is you can't just write whatever you want. We've got to keep you guys happy, and we've got to, importantly, keep our publisher happy as well. So some of the stories about Andrew and myself didn't actually make it into the book. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of case studies, there's a lot of stories, you'll learn some stuff about us. But at its core, this is not a book about Andrew Nicol, Ed McKnight and Opus Partners. This is a book about property investment and what you guys can learn about it. It's a book about what you guys can actually do. So what we thought we'd do tonight is we'd share some of the stories that didn't make it into the book. Some of the stories about Andrew and how he got started. So we're going to hear, first of all, from Andrew, the story about how he went from growing up in a pretty blue-collar part of Christchurch through to having so many investment properties, he can't actually tell me how many he owns tonight.
I'm just worried you're trying to claim relationship property.
We're going to get there. We have many witnesses. So here's what's going to happen. Andrew's got to kick it off. I'm then going to get up and speak and talk about when I was horrendously in debt and then how I got out of it. And then we're going to have a little bit of Q&A. So as we go through tonight, write down your questions and we're going to do those at the end. Then we'll have a couple more drinks. You'll meet some fellow property investors and then we'll sign your books and have a great rest of the night. Cool. But first, I do want you to put your hands together for now author and the Prince of Property, Andrew Nicol.
First cab off the rank. So when I was growing up, I just wanted to make money. And it's not that money mattered to me, but money matters a lot when you don't have any. And the only people that tell you that money doesn't matter are usually the ones that have already got money. And I grew up in this poor suburb of Christchurch, and it is safe to say that the Nicol family did not have money. My parents were blue-collar workers, Dad worked 2 jobs, and Mum cleaned offices at night. And as much as my parents tried to shield us kids from their money worries, I always knew that money was an issue at home. And I don't want anyone here tonight to feel bad if you feel like you're in that situation right now. You might be working long hours, you might have multiple jobs, and even after all that, you might feel like you're not getting ahead. But I do hope that my story can change someone's life to avoid the cycle of poverty. Now, have you all heard the term feast or famine, yes? Yep. So my dad was paid monthly on the 20th of every month, which meant that my family would live paycheck to paycheck. So for the first 2 weeks of every month, we lived like kings. We were rich. Now, just for context, if you're rich in the Nicol household, that meant fish and chips on a Friday night. But for the last 2 weeks of every month, we were back to being poor. Now, that might mean corned beef for dinner, which I still can't eat to this day. Or sometimes nachos with mince that Mum would bulk up using rolled oats. And as a 12-year-old kid standing at the end of the hallway at night, I could hear my parents worry about the money that they didn't have to pay their mortgage. So when I tell you that I just wanted to make money, it wasn't that I wanted money for money's sake. I wasn't looking for a fast car or fancy watches, because none of that shit motivated me back then. What I wanted was to avoid the same situation as my parents. I didn't want to carry that same burden as an adult, that same worry. What really motivated the 12-year-old boy who would cry himself to sleep at night worrying about his parents was being free from the stress of poverty. Because as a kid, although you don't have those money worries directly, you absolutely carry the stress. Trust me, I remember. Now, some of you will know that my fiancé and I just recently had our first child. And while no home is completely free from worry or stress, when I look down at Eliza, thank you, I'm relieved that at the very least, my sacrifices mean that Eliza and Lauren will never worry about money like I did. Now, before any of you make the mistake of thinking that getting to where I am today has been easy, let me give you some of the highlights of what's been a hell of a journey. Because as a kid, my desire to make money meant I'd dream up all these wacky ideas. I originally thought this was to tell you how Eliza was made. I'll tell you about one of the first ones. One summer, my younger brother came home with a bunch of tadpoles from a creek near our house. And my brother Josh took them to Black's Pet Shop on Opawa Road and he sold them for 10 cents each. And I was beside myself with excitement. All I needed to do was find 100 tadpoles and I was going to make $10. I was going to be rich. So I roped in my friend Damon Redmond, who's sitting over there, into coming over to my house and unwittingly becoming my first business partner. And my dad dropped us off at the same spot as my brother, or so we thought, and we climbed around the cliffs of the Opawa Gully for hours, clambering up and then climbing through gores, and after 6 hours we came home filthy, lost and covered in scratches. So we're lost kids, no cash, so we convinced a bus driver to drop us back to Waltham for free. And Amon and I arrived home with a grand total of 0 tadpoles, but a good story to tell, even if Amon doesn't think so. So I think it's fair to say my first business venture wasn't exactly a roaring success. But does anyone remember coconut ice? This was my next get-rich-quick scheme. I'd produce and package this Kiwi classic with my friend Tim Harmon, my next business partner, and we'd destroy my mum's kitchen in the process. Then we'd go door to door and talk my neighbours into buying our inedible ice. And remember, these were back in the days when I could trade on my good looks and charm. Here's the evidence. Now, this was my first, and even to this day, my most profitable business venture, at least before Mum shut it down. And there's so many other business ventures that I tried over the years, but where things took a turn was when I was 17 and still at high school. I entered this competition at high school where you assumed the role of the Reserve Bank, the guys that control the interest rates, and you'd make a prediction of what the Reserve Bank were going to do with the OCR. Would they increase it? Would they decrease it? Or would they keep it the same? Then, of course, what you had to do was you'd have to explain and justify your thinking to a panel from the actual Reserve Bank. And because I was collecting a bunch of information from banks to make my assessment, I caught the eye of this branch manager who said to me, maybe I want to work in banking once I finish high school. Now, I liked this idea, so a month later, I applied for jobs at BNZ International, and a few weeks after that, I had my first job at BNZ. Now, there are these moments in your life where something hits you. This moment of clarity where the heavens part and you realise something to be true. And this feeling, this excitement, that's exactly how I felt when I thought I could make money from tadpoles. And I got that feeling again when I was working at the BNZ. What I realised is that the people I was dealing with, mostly property investors, they weren't necessarily on big incomes. And a lot of them were seriously wealthy. I remember this one guy, Mr. Carruthers, that's his real name. He was on a pretty normal income at the time, about $50,000 a year, and he owned 5 rental properties. And it was at this moment I realised that you don't get wealthy working a 9-to-5 job, exchanging your time for money. You don't get rich. You don't improve your financial life. You don't get ahead and give your family options by working hard for your money. You build wealth by making your money work hard for you. Write that down if you've got a pen. You don't improve your financial life by working hard for your money. You build wealth by making your money work hard for you. And it was at that moment I realised that I was going to be a property investor. So I started saving a deposit, and I did all the things we tell you to do in this book when you're starting out. I hardly went out. I definitely limited the amount I'd spend on alcohol. This was a long time ago. And I lived at home with my parents. And when I finally moved out of their house, I lived in the backyard in a unit. And I saved every single dollar that I could. And on top of that, I went to every property investment seminar I could go to. I'd read every magazine, and I got every single book from the library on property investment. And I managed to save about $10,000 as a deposit, which was enough to buy a $200,000 house with a 95% loan. So there I was. I had the money, and I had the knowledge, but I was scared. You see, my biggest problem was actually making a decision. I'd been to all these open homes, but I hadn't put pen to paper. I hadn't committed to taking action. He's here. Which is when I met local mortgage legend Tony Mounts, who changed my life. Where is he? Oh, there he is. I was still at the bank, and I went out with Tony for the day, and we were driving between appointments, and if anyone's been in the car with Tony, that's fucking terrifying. And I told him I was thinking about buying my first investment property. I'd saved a deposit, I'd been going to open homes, and Tony looked at me and he said, just buy something then. So I did. So my girlfriend at the time, Alice, who was my third business partner, we purchased a 5-bedroom house in Phillipstown in Christchurch for $220,000. Now remember, this was back in 2003 where things were black and white, and the good old days. And we decided to renovate the property because that's what we needed to do to get ahead. We needed to build our equity and add value. I'd leave the bank at 7 o'clock at night, and then we'd spend the evening working on the property. And at the time, I felt like I was on the season of The Block. We had the hammer, paintbrush, we were doing all the renovations ourselves. But you know on The Block, where they do the big reveal and the couple are feeling all proud, and then they zoom into the shot and they look at all the details that they messed up or did wrong. Yeah, that was us. One of our design features was giving each of the 5 bedrooms a different coloured feature wall. One was brown, one was blue, one was green. I blame Alice Stewart for that design choice. But that wasn't our only mistake, and it certainly wasn't one of the biggest ones. One of the biggest ones was we didn't use a property manager. We were trying to save money, and I'd read the book, so I knew what I was doing. Now, this was after a seasoned property manager viewed my property and said, sell it. But I knew better. We rented the property out on a room-by-room basis because we wanted to get the highest yield possible. But what we actually got was a whole lot of damage and so many issues with tenants. So about 6 months later, we finally accepted the advice and we sold McKnight Street for $250,000, which meant we were walking away with an extra $27K profit, which isn't bad from a $15K investment. Now, at the time, I honestly felt like I was Donald Trump. Mostly because you didn't pay tax back then. And I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking you should have sold that property before there was damage. You should have listened to that property manager. But what do you think that property's worth today? Probably $650,000. So I made a quick $27,000, but I didn't double my money because I sold too early. You see, the real money in property investment isn't made through renovations and flips. And yes, you can absolutely make money that way. But the serious money, the life-changing money, that comes through long-term capital growth. And this mistake, that's the biggest mistake I made. And one I see investors make all the time. They sell too early. Now, I was okay because I learned from my mistakes and I wasn't put off with the issues that I had with tenants. And McKnight Street was the first deal of what would become a large portfolio. But I've made my fair share of mistakes. And it's these mistakes that Ed and I are trying to help you avoid by writing this book. So I left my job at the BNZ and I became a mortgage broker, working with property investors, all while investing myself. And here's the issue I saw then and I still see today. A lot of Kiwis, they want to invest in property, but they never do. They talk themselves out of it, or they do invest and then they run into hurdles and then they sell too early rather than weathering the storm. Some of us probably feel like that right now. And the combination of making some mistakes myself, but also seeing what property does for people's lives, that's what made me become a financial advisor. Because my drive now is to help other people use property to better their financial lives. I started Opus 10 years ago to help people avoid the same mistakes I made when investing, and to help people actually get started and to grow a portfolio. Because sometimes you go to a barbecue and there's a property investor there and they say property investment is easy. Yeah, it's easy if you've done it before. And yes, it's easy if you've got 23 properties, and yes, it's easy if you've renovated 14. Everything's easy with experience. But doing it for the first time, taking the first step or even investing in that third property, that takes guts. And I guarantee you it'll cause some sleepless nights. It can be really scary, and sometimes we all just need a guiding hand or someone to kick us up the arse. Taxi. And that's what I want to be. I want to be that annoying voice in your head that says, keep going, you can do this. And it's been humbling because over the years, I've worked with thousands of investors who are willing to share every intimate detail of their financial situation so I can put them in a better financial position. Now, as much as we all like to think that we're unique, we really aren't. 99% of the people that have sat at my desk, they've got at least one thing in common. When we talk about their goals, when we talk about what they want in the future, and more importantly, what it's going to cost them to do that, 99% of them have a wealth gap. So what's a wealth gap? A wealth gap is the difference between where you want to be in the future and where you're heading right now. So let's think about this for a minute. Picture exactly where you want to be in 20 years' time and actually think about it. Take a moment to think what you want in 20 years' time. If we were to bring out a time machine and fast forward, what does the future you look like? Where are you living? What kind of car's parked in the driveway? Are you still working? And when was the last time you took a holiday? For some of you, you might just want to maintain your current lifestyle. But for others, you want to ramp up your lifestyle. You want to enjoy the things that you don't have time for right now because you're working full time. And whatever the image is in your head right now, you then need to work out, well, what's that going to cost you to actually do? Now, we've got calculators on our website to help you work out exactly to the cent how much that you're going to need. But here's some ballpark figures from Massey University to get you thinking. So you've paid off your mortgage and you're happy with a basic no-frills lifestyle. That's about $55,000 before tax, today's dollars, per annum. Now, you're definitely going to have to be careful with money. So no dinners out and definitely no holidays. Now, to give you an example, and they go through this, your budget allows you to spend less than $20 a week on fruit and vegetables. So you can afford half a zucchini when they're in season. Now, $80,000 a year, that's a more comfortable retirement. You're still going to have to be careful with money, but not quite as careful as the basic lifestyle. Once you get to $100,000 a year, this is a well-off lifestyle. You get to upgrade the car every now and then. You can go on holiday every now and then. You can go out for dinner with your friends and you don't have to worry so much. And what Massey University calls an affluent lifestyle, that's anything above $150,000 a year. This is when you can help your family out. This is when you can travel across the US in a Mustang or go swimming with dolphins in the grass. And one of the most important things about the affluent lifestyle, if something happens to your health, you can afford to fix it. And I think it's really important at this point to point out, if your plan right now is to rely on the New Zealand superannuation, which is a bold plan, by the way, and this is assuming that it still exists in 20 years' time, the New Zealand super alone is not even enough to provide the basic lifestyle. And that's if you're single, living alone, and in a small town. So, back to the concept of wealth gap. Every one of us here aspires to one of these lifestyles. We dream of holidays overseas or dolphins in Greece or dinners out, whatever it is for you. But when you calculate what it's actually going to cost you to live that life and you weigh it up against what you're doing right now, there's probably a gap. There's a shortfall. So take away the dolphins, take away the sandy beach, take away the nice house and the new car, take away the dinners out because you're at home cooking with that half a zucchini. Because for most people, you're not doing enough now to get to where you want to be. You're not making the sacrifices right now so that you won't need to sacrifice in the future. And I don't say this to be harsh, this is just maths. Most people here have a wealth gap. And ultimately, that's what our book is about. Yes, it's a book about property investment, but more than that, it's a book about how to use property to close your wealth gap. It'll tell you if you want a 100K lifestyle, but you're on track for 50K, then you've got a wealth gap. And like most, you do have a wealth gap. How many assets are you going to need to close that gap? And then how can you build these assets through property? And the funny thing is, a lot of you here, I can see nodding, and you're saying, yeah, that makes sense. And of course it does. But how many of us actually sit down and work this stuff out? And one of the big decisions we made in conjunction with releasing this book was that we're also releasing our internal software to assess someone's wealth gap. And I want you all to sit down this week. And it's probably going to help if you pour a glass of wine first. And put in your numbers. See if you have a wealth gap. And if you do, how big is it? And the reason we made this free for everyone, including yourself, is so that if you do have a wealth gap, then you also have the opportunity to actually do something about it. And in some ways, this is the piece of the puzzle I was missing when I decided to be a property investor. What I thought I wanted was to be rich. But what I actually wanted was to have choices. I started a family because of positive influences like Tony Mounts. People like Tony who gave me the courage to make a sacrifice now and get into property investment. And I'm now in a position to raise my daughter in a world where money will never limit her choices. And that's what Ed and I want to give you. We want to give you the resources to achieve your goals, whatever they are. You don't have to go out and buy 40 properties, but you can now go home and work out exactly what you need. And then you can take some action. You can make some sacrifices. Because it isn't about the money. It's about the choices you'll have in the future.
Give them a hand. How good was that? Honestly, I know I talk to him every day, but I still find it inspirational. We'll get the text sorted. Where are you off to?
Oh, David, he'll help me with this.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Am I good to go, or is it still thing? This is the point where I always wish that I had jokes that were appropriate to tell at these times.
Tell them the frog one.
What, the paddywhack?
Oh,
it's not funny. It's a mortgage broker joke. Only Tony's got to find that funny. Anyway, the good news is that is it working now? Even if it doesn't work, I'll just yell at you and it'll be okay. It'll be like listening to the podcast. Anyway, the good thing while he's getting that sorted is the thing I love about Andrew's story is that it shows you that even if you grow up pretty poor, you can actually take action in order to improve your life. And I think in many ways it shows that the Kiwi dream still is alive and well. Now, the good thing is, find a seat, there's one over there.
Oh, is that black? Is that meant to be black?
That's meant to be black.
I thought that was wrong.
No, I've prepared this. Get off the stage. I've got the talkie stick now because I've got to tell them something. I've got to tell them that not long ago, I'll tell you, I was a loser. I mean, don't laugh. This is serious. I was a loser. I mean, embarrassed to tell you about it, loser. I mean, it took me over 811 episodes of the Property Academy podcast to have the guts to tell you about it, loser. Because here I am, 24 years old, and behind that smile, holding my wee nephew, is a guy who's actually struggling. because at this age, Christmas 2016, I had 16.5 grand worth of bubblegum debt. I'm talking credit card debt, I'm talking overdrafts, I'm talking about personal loans, 16.5 grand. And what did I earn at the time? My base salary was about 45 grand. Now, let me put that into perspective for you. It would take me from January the 1st all the way through to June the 7th to pay that back. Not spending a cent at the grocery store, not paying my rent, just working and paying back debt, about half the year. And I remember being this age when reality hit me. And I was standing in the shower, couldn't tell whether that's water or tears running down my face, and I'm thinking, I am a loser. I should be smarter than this. I've got a degree in economics. I meant to know how money works. I should be smarter than this. And how many of you have felt like that? I'm not talking about just not being where you want to be financially, but that feeling of embarrassment, that feeling of guilt, the feeling of shame, the feeling of, I should be smarter than this. Well, there's no judgment here because I've been there and I've done that and I know what that's like. And let me tell you, it's scary. And sometimes it's even worse than that. It's lonely because you feel like you can't tell anyone and you feel like you can't say anything. You feel alone. So let me tell you how I got into that situation and even more how I got out of it. It certainly wasn't this though. So I'm not sure if you can tell this, but I've always liked to colour outside the lines, and university was a great example of this because I thought it was a good idea to not only study economics but also to study opera singing. And my teachers, my high school teachers at the time, they thought I was crazy. I remember I had one housemaster actually, Rowan McCullum, and he said to me, "Ooh, an opera singing economist, just what the world needs." He was right, by the way. Turns out nobody needed that at all. But that odd decision represents what a lot of my other choices were like at the time. I was trying a lot of weird, a lot of wacky stuff, trying to be successful. And I'll give you another example. After I was done with university, I went and worked for the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra, and then once I was done with that, I saw a job going at ASB. And I thought, I know how I'm going to get this. So I set up a Facebook page, and I started running Facebook ads targeted at ASB employees. And the way that would work, this is real, this is not even made up, but the way that would work is that if you said, I work for ASB on your Facebook page, you'd get my ads clogging up your Facebook feed, much like they do now. And if you clicked on that ad, let's get back to it. If you clicked on that ad, what would happen is you'd get taken to a website I made all about why ASB should hire me. And I got heaps of comments, actually. The head of marketing at ASB at the time said, great way to get our attention. And all up, I think I spent about $27, maybe 38 cents on those ads. Got the interview, didn't get the job. And that's mainly because it required 7 to 10 years worth of experience, and maybe I had 1.5 tops at the time. But while I didn't get the job, the newspapers picked up the story, and I got a lot of job offers, and I wound up working for my friend's digital agency. And that's where my troubles began. So at this new job, I got a pay increase. I went all the way from 44 grand a year, which was what I was earning at the orchestra, and I got up to 45 grand a year. So it was a $1,000 pay increase, not much, but I also got a bit of a bonus if I met certain targets, right? Now, everything went great for the first 3 months. Hit the target, got my bonus, woohoo, more money than I had ever had in my life, and it was like 3 grand from the past 3 months. And now I'm starting to get used to living on more money. What we call lifestyle inflation. You earn more, so you spend more. But then what happened? My targets went up and up and up, and after 6 months, my targets were 2.5 times what they were when I started just 6 months ago. And that was never in the plan. And with all of this, the business is going pretty well, even better than when I started, much better than when I started just 6 months ago. But because my targets were way higher, and importantly, my boss changed how they were calculated, one day, the next payday rolls around and I open up my ASB app and there's way less money in there than I'm expecting. And I'm thinking, there's got to be some sort of mistake. So I email my boss and I get this email back. He says, I thought we'd been through this. And I actually fished this out. He said, I thought we'd been through this. We changed how your targets are calculated. You only get part of your bonus. Now, what was the issue? Yeah, I was pretty peeved off. We were clearly on different pages, and I tell you, I felt cheated by a friend. But that wasn't the issue. He wasn't the issue. I was the problem, because I was the one who was out there living on my credit cards like that money was guaranteed to come in, and then the money never came. I was out there spending money I didn't have, thinking it'd all be sweet later, and it only took about 2 quarters, just 6 months of this going on, and a bad spending decision here and there on the interest-free GEM visa, and now I'm pretty severely into debt. You know what that's like? And you know, I'll tell you, the most crushing part was I wanted so badly to be successful, to get out of that small town that I grew up in, to make something of myself. But I was doing a whole heap of fringy stuff, the stuff that I thought would help me be successful, like being an opera singing economist, like trying to go work for an orchestra, like trying to get a job at the bank by running Facebook ads and then working for a friend's digital agency and trying to get a shareholding on that. Whole heap of stuff, looking for my one big hit that never came. And I was still a loser, at least financially. And that's how I remember I was 24, back in the shower, 16.5 grand in debt, and all I'm thinking is, yep, I'm a loser. Yep, I should be smarter than this. But how am I going to get myself out? Accurate depiction for those of you who like Arrested Development. So it all started with a strategy that we've talked about on the podcast before. I dominoed my debts. I listed out every single one of them, from the smallest through to the largest, and I started with the smallest. Now, mathematically, the best thing to do would be to pay back the one with the highest interest rate, right? Not the smallest, the one with the highest interest rate, the most expensive debt. That didn't matter to me. I just wanted to get rid of one debt. I just wanted one weight off my back so I could just breathe a little more. So I started with the smallest because this wasn't about making the technically smartest financial decision. I'd already proved I wasn't capable of that. But I did want to change my behaviour, because that was the key. So I paid as little as possible on all the debts except the top one, and I started with the first one, the smallest one. That's the first step. But, you know, you can't just pay off debt. It's not that simple. Remember, what I was spending was higher than what was hitting my account each week, so I had to get my income up. So I used another strategy, and this time it was one from the book. You know this one. No, that's enough. I only put that in there because if you don't laugh and if you don't dance, sometimes you'll end up crying in the shower. So I used this strategy, the Earn Baby Earn, and you're going to learn about it both in the podcast and in the book. But what I had to do was I had to restructure my pay. I needed to take home more money each week, and I needed more money hitting my bank account so I could use that to then pay off debt. So I did something scary again. I had a one-on-one with my boss, and these conversations are pretty scary, especially when you're talking about money with a friend. So we're sitting under this exact tree on Remuera Road up in Auckland, and I sat him down and I said, mate, this isn't working for me. I'm doing this work, the company's doing good, but the way my remuneration is structured, I'm broke. The way this is set up, I'm going backwards. And you know what? To his credit, we sat there under that tree for 1 hour, and by the end of it, we'd renegotiated what I took home each week. My total package became smaller, but that didn't matter to me because my base pay increased by 25 grand that day. Now, that 1 hour conversation, that was life-changing. That was the start of me getting out of this debt. First, when I recognised that, hey, something needs to change, and then secondly, when we locked in that pay restructure. And so, with more money coming in, I got the chance to breathe a little. I got the chance to knock over that first domino. And when I deleted that from the spreadsheet, and I saw some of you laughing because there are 2 parking fines up there because that's how I drive. But when I deleted that, let me tell you, boy, did that feel good. And then I cleared the next one. That's another domino gone. And then the next one. That's another domino gone. And each time I paid one off, I took all of the money I was putting towards that one and I moved to the next one, started paying down the next one in the chain. And then I bought my first property. And I didn't even think I could. I wasn't even thinking about it at the time because I was trying to get out of debt. I didn't want to get into even more of it and I didn't even think I could. But I was sitting out for dinner with a friend and he worked for Opus at the time and he looked at me and he said, "How much have you got in your KiwiSaver?" And I told him. And he said, "That's enough. We're going to look at properties tomorrow." So he picks me up the next day and we go off and we end up looking at an apartment. And it wasn't even the unit that I end up buying. And I remember standing there and Andrew was there, wherever he's gone. And I looked at him and I said, "Mate, is this the right thing to do?" Now, if any of you know Andrew, you can picture what happened next. He threw up his hands like this, embarked, absolutely, and marched off down the hall. And that very day, it actually happened, it was exactly like that. That very day, I went back to the Opus office, I wasn't working for them at the time, and I signed the papers with a shaky hand and I bought that property. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know where I was going to get the money from. I only had my KiwiSaver. You can't use that for an investment property. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But I used a good mortgage advisor. And after a lot of back and forth with the bank, we got that deal over the line. Lived in it for a wee bit, turned it into an investment property. And that property, let me tell you, easiest couple of $100,000 I've ever made in my life. And that's the beginning of how my financial life ended up turning around. But there was one more critical element. I came back to my roots as an economist. You see, for so many years, I tried different jobs. I tried to do things that I thought sounded cool, things that sounded sexy. But you know what? I'm a data nerd. I'm an economist. I'm a spreadsheet guy. I want to bash Bill Gates for inventing the glory that is Excel. It's a buff-looking Bill Gates. Maybe only half of the last part. But I came back to what I was good at. It's not cool. It's not sexy. Don't get me wrong. I find it really exciting. But no kid grows up wanting to be an economist, even though perhaps they should. But doing that, focusing on what I was good at, focusing on what works, that's what's allowed me to increase my income. And doing that, that's what's allowed me to invest in property further. It's not sexy, not cool. Definitely the way to dead end a conversation with a hot girl down at Austin Bar, but it's what works for me. You see, I was doing all of this fringe stuff, and I thought that's what was going to help me be successful, but it didn't. What worked for me? It was all the boring stuff. Pay down debt, increase your income, focus on what you're good at so you actually can increase your income. And that basic approach, I think you can apply that to property too, because you don't have to do a whole heap of fancy stuff to succeed in property. You don't. And you don't have to do a whole heap of fancy stuff in property to close your wealth gap. 4 to 5 properties, bought well, held for the long term. The capital growth, the increase in value on that over 15, 20 years, that's going to be enough to sort most investors out. And when you do follow a simple passive strategy like that, you often have to remind yourself to just stay the course. You know, I remember in March last year when the new tax rules came out, there were special tax incentives to take a house, pop it on the back of a truck and plonk it somewhere else, just like this. I remember going to sleep about April last year when the new rules came out, and I was thinking, this is how I'm going to get rich. I'm going to take some houses off some developers, I'm going to put them on the trucks, I'm going to go put them somewhere else. But then I wake up and I remember that I don't know the finer details of how to do that. I don't know how to get that done. And for me at least, if you've seen my desk, there's no time for me to get that done. Now, again, like Andrew said, that's not to say you can't make money through a renovation strategy or a development strategy or any other type of active strategy. You absolutely can. But it's not going to be the right fit for everyone. And for me, at least, I have to remind myself that it's not the right fit for me either. You see, for some people, especially those, if you've got a young family or maybe if you're trying to advance your career, trying to grow a business, those more time-intensive strategies might not be time for those. So, what is the way to do a passive buy and hold strategy the right way? Well, number one, and it comes from the book, is to buy properties that fit with your plan. So there are two types of properties, growth and yield. Your growth properties, they're going to increase in value faster, but the cash flow is going to be worse. On the other hand, your yield properties, they're going to provide you better cash flow, but they're not going to grow in value as quickly. It's going to be a little bit more slow. Now, you are going to use both, as you'll learn in the book, as part of your plan. But the main one for investors with a serious wealth gap is to start by going for growth properties, because these are the ones that are going to increase in value fastest. These are the ones that are going to close your wealth gap. So usually, first step is to go for growth. Now, your second step is to find properties that are in, and this is the exciting part because we're getting into numbers now, is to find properties in the right part of their property cycle. Now, you guys who have listened to the Property Academy podcast for maybe 3 years, do we have anybody who's listened for 3 years? Chuck your hands up. You can't put your hand up, you've been on it for 3 years. Well, you guys will have already heard me natter on about this. We're looking for areas that are relatively undervalued, let me put it up, they're relatively undervalued compared to where we'd expect them to be. And the way this is done is, like this graph here, we're looking for areas that are relatively undervalued compared to where we'd expect them to be. And the way you do this is you say, well, where's the Christchurch property market at right now? And by the way, this actually is, you guys, you're about 16 to 17% undervalued last time I read the numbers. And it's saying Christchurch is looking pretty cheap relative to where we'd expect Christchurch to be. Now, there's a lot more number crunching to it than that, and you get links to live data of this in the book as well, so look out for that. But that's the crux of it. Now, what's that going to do for us? If we're investing in relatively undervalued areas, that is going to give us the best shot at medium-term growth, because we're investing in areas that are poised to take off more quickly than others. So firstly, your growth properties. That's going to set us up for the long term. And then investing in relatively undervalued areas, that's going to set us up for the medium term. But thirdly, and this is most important, is running the numbers. Now, if you can't pull up right now the spreadsheet that you used to buy your last investment property, you haven't run your numbers. You haven't. And I'm not saying your spreadsheet has to be super fancy. You don't have to use mine, but you do need some mathematical basis for deciding what you're going to invest in and what you're not, even if it's majorly simple. And the great con of property investment, let me tell you, it's a big, great con. Everybody tells you, you got to run your numbers. But nobody tells you, first of all, which numbers to run, and then how to evaluate which ones are actually good or not. So I'm going to tell you what you need to run. The first one is your return on investment. This is important, because what this is it's a measure of, for every dollar I put into an investment property, how many dollars do I get back? And that means you can compare properties across regions, across prices, with different levels of rent. That's what allows you to do it. And the second is your cash flow per week. Let's get that up there. And this is really important, especially when your properties are negatively geared and you as an investor, as the vast bulk of you have any size of mortgage, are going to find over the next couple of years, is that we're going to have to top up those bank accounts. So we need to know the cash flow per week, because if you're going to get the long-term gains, the long-term capital growth of property, we need to make sure that we can actually hold those properties for the long term. So those are the two, return on investment and weekly cash flow. And rather than walk you through the nitty-gritty details of how to do this, the easiest way to actually figure out both is to use the spreadsheet. Now, would you believe it? It's been downloaded now by over 8,000 property investors around the country who use this spreadsheet to run their numbers. Has anybody downloaded it? Now keep your hands up if you use it. Yeah, there's actually more than I thought was going to be. Good on you. You're going to be my friend. We're going to have a drink after this. Again, this is free for you to download. You can go do it. Links in the book. But these three things, investing in growth properties, investing in undervalued regions, running the numbers, this is the foundation of a passive buy and hold strategy. It's not sexy, it's just common sense. And as much as I let myself get excited about maybe I could make some money through renovations, or maybe I could make some money by putting the house on the truck, putting the house over here on the bare land to get some tax incentives, I know that given where I am personally in my life, this boring, basic strategy, that's the one that's right for me. You know, I started off tonight talking about how 5 years ago, I was a loser. I had a negative net worth, I was in a hole, I had a lot of debt compared to what I earned. But I stand here 5 years later, no credit card debt, no overdrafts, no personal loans, a ton of mortgage debt, but the right type of debt. The type of debt that's allowed me to take where I am financially and move significantly in the right direction in just 5 to 6 years. Now, I don't know who I'm about to talk to today, but I know I'm about to talk to somebody in this room. Your story is similar, if not the same. Maybe you came from a bad background. You thought the odds were against you, and at some point in your life, maybe you thought you were a loser too. But I want you to take a second and look at where you are now. Look at what you've done to work yourself out. Look at the progress you've made. Just take a second to be proud of the progress you have made. And like me, you know you're not done yet. You're not at the end of your journey. You know that. But you also know that if you stay the course, if you do what needs to be done, you're going to close your wealth gap and be able to live a better tomorrow. Deep down, that's what the book is about. The book's about progress, about small steps towards a bigger goal, about using practical strategies throughout your lifetime. And, you know, we know these strategies work. I talk about the debt domino on the podcast because you've seen it. I know that works. The mortgage buster, the debt destroyer, the earn baby earn, those are in the book because Andrew and I have used them, and we've used them for our clients as well, the investors we work with, and we know they work. And when you put them into action, you are going to make progress. You're going to achieve your goals. So that's the book. That's the message. And, you know, one of the great privileges of doing what we do is occasionally we get emails and people might come up to us on the street like yourselves and you might say, Ed, we've done it. We've invested. We're on our journey. And over time, we get to see you guys succeed. Succeed not just because you invested in property or not just because you invested, but because you actually did something. And for those who invest with OPAs, we get to play a little bit of a closer role as well and get to see you succeed even more closely. And I tell you, knowing that some of you in this room are going to take that book, you're going to read it, and you're going to use some of the strategies in there to build your wealth, provide for your families, and create that better tomorrow. That's what makes all of the late nights writing this book, the time it takes to do the podcasts, the magazines, the articles, the webinars. I've probably forgotten some things, but it makes it all worth it because of what that sort of progress is going to mean for you guys. Thanks. Andrew, get back up here. Right, Andrew, get back up here.
Hang on.
You bring a half-drunk wine glass
Oh, it's
up
empty.
there. It's empty.
I thought you were the barman.
But look, I actually do mean that. You know, the response that you guys give us is what makes all of the stuff worth it for us. And no matter which way you want to make progress, we do want to be there for you. So, of course, number one is the book. We've released that. That's pretty cool. Number
3
two,
years.
What's that?
3 years.
3 years. Yeah. We started talking about that we were going to release a book even before we'd even started it. I remember it started with the Epic Guide to Property Investment, which was 16,000 words long, that we wrote in 2019, and finally we end up with our 90,000 word book. Secondly, we're going to release that My Wealth Plan software for you guys as well, so that if you want to make progress by figuring out your wealth gap, you've got that opportunity. And I remember actually, A competitor told us not to do it, right?
Oh, so good.
Tell them, they want to know.
I just shouldn't name who it is.
Don't name who it is.
Okay. But one of our competitors, I had a drink with them not so long ago, after I saw their ad with a new skin version of our software. And they'd just had one of our staff members move to their company. Anyway, I then let the air out of his tyres. Is that the word?
Yeah,
no, I didn't actually let the air out of his tyres. Let the air out of his tyres, figuratively speaking, because I told him we're going to release our software for free to everyone in New Zealand to use. He's very upset about it.
Brought it up 3 times, you told.
Yeah, he's rung me 3 times to say you really should reconsider that.
So, first 2 ways if you want to make progress. And the third way is if you do really want to fast track this, then your next step might be to book a portfolio planning session with our team. If you want to go through the whole process, look at properties, use that software, really look at filling your wealth gap. And if you want to do that, you've all got feedback forms in your wee boxes, in your bags. There's a wee tick box just to use if that's what you want to do. But that is the final thing before we move into question time. We want to hear from you guys, because the thing is, in your bags, everyone's got a feedback form. And so everybody's going to fill that out before you get your next drink, because here's the thing. Without you guys emailing me, I don't have content for the podcast. And without you guys emailing me, I don't have content for the webinars and the magazines. So we want to get to know you guys so that we can create the right type of content for you guys. But just before that, I think, do we have time, Michael, for a couple of questions, or are we out of time?
I think you're good.
We'll do 3 questions. We got time for 3 questions. Does anybody have a question before I have to make one up for myself? Oh, I'm going to pick on people. Yes, my friend here. I've got a friend over here with a question. He's the brave one. Hopefully it's one for you.
Hopefully it's an easy one.
Oh no, I was thinking that.
I didn't expect nobody raised their hand. And very quick questions on the business side. So now you have 3 products there. You've written a book and you have a software, but now it's for free. And now you have portfolio planning section, also free of charge. Then what are the products and services that you guys are offering?
Sure. So we have a real estate service. We have, which is for people that have been with us for a while and now need to sell their investment properties because they're transitioning into maybe a yield-based portfolio. We've got a mortgage broking service. We've got an insurance service. We have 2 magazines. We have an accounting service. We have...
Did you say the mortgage broking yet?
Yeah, I said mortgage broking, didn't I? Mortgage broking, accounting business. We have... anything else?
I think there's 7.
Oh, and we've got Opus Accelerate, where we help people renovate properties to cash flow hack them and improve values. Basically, we have any ideas that I come up with, and I'm allowed to get past Ed and Ollie.
We've stopped them doing that as much, but thank you for that. Cool, we've got time for 2 more. Who wants to be brave and put up their hands?
This has got to be the easiest.
This is great. Honestly, I thought it was going to be very difficult. I thought it was going to be like the webinars where you all type them in. It's very difficult.
Frantic.
Yes, my friend here. I see you. Go on, give her the mic, Jake.
Come on, Jake.
Make it an easy one for us.
One for Ed, you say?
It's a question for you, because you're history and renovating. What is a realistic amount you could probably get off a profit now?
Renovating properties is quite a lot different to back when I was doing it, because one of the biggest things, seriously, was that you didn't have to pay. Anyone here from the IRD? You didn't pay tax. You didn't pay, leave. You didn't pay tax like you do today. So nowadays you're captured by the Brightline test. You pay Brightline, often GST, depending on if you're a trader. You've basically got this horrible business partner that takes half of your profit and doesn't give you anything back. You know the type.
Oh, mate. You write a book by yourself then. You try have the podcast without this annoying voice.
So I think nowadays you might realistically in this market, make 10 to 20%, but you're going to lose half of that to the IRD. I just don't think it's worth it. I think the only way that you would do that is buy, renovate, and hold. because you want to be outside of that bright line. And if you're going to do that and you want to make money quicker, then you probably need to be thinking about voting national next time, so that maybe we don't have a bright line that's quite as long. But it's unrealistic to make the kind of gains that I did back in those days, because all of it goes to the IRD and they capture everything. They're very good.
I'll give you an example as well. We're currently working with an investor who's buying a new Plymouth, and they bought a property there for 500k. They've spent 65 grand on the renovations, and we're expecting it's going to be worth 670 grand by the end of it. So they're going to make ballpark 105 grand uplift from the 65k spend. The bare minimum we often talk about on the podcast is 1 for 1. So if you spend 50 grand on renovating a property, you should expect bare minimum that property to increase in value by 100k. Now, just to be clear, you've got to make sure that that actually happens. We've seen investors who would spend, I heard about one, Michelle, mortgage broker at the back today, told me about an investor we're working with who didn't go through our service, just to be really clear, spent $1 million renovating a property, it increased in value by 600k. So not every renovation is profitable, right? But what you should target is kind of bare minimum 1 for 1 is what we talk about.
Was that investor Lauren Humphreys?
That's not an investment, mate. It's your own home. Doesn't earn an income. I've got time for one more.
I'm just wondering if you guys are worried about the near future for property prices and that. Do you think they're going to come down a bit more, or what are your thoughts?
Yep, I think they're definitely going to come down. Well, our prediction is that we are going to see a market shift a little bit more in some places. Ed will talk more about that because he's the data nerd. But it doesn't matter when you buy property, it matters when you sell properties. So if you're expecting to make money in the next year, you're in the wrong game. Go and invest in something else. If you buy a property today and you sell it in 20 years' time, it doesn't matter what the market does in the next 12 months, because no one can tell you what the market's going to do next month or next year. But I think that now's got some great opportunities, and you've got to remember there is always a positive and a negative to every market. Right now, you're getting a good price because people are desperate, but you're paying high interest rates and it's hard to get the dough. Last year, you paid a higher price, but it was easier to get the money. So there are pros and cons of every market, and you've just got to be thinking about it for the long term, because that's the only way that you can have certainty of outcome in property. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, well, look, I'm not personally worried because I'm still in acquisition mode. You know, I heard about a property going today in Christchurch for 535 grand, and I thought, my God, that would have been 620 only 12 months ago. I was quite excited about that. I said, Andrew, the good times are back. I can afford to buy property because servicing, because obviously purchase price really impacts servicing. Of course, some things have changed, like servicing test rates, those kinds of things. But as long as you have a long-term outlook, not really. Now, I've been saying as well on the podcast that we're kind of in the end game of property price falls. Right across New Zealand, we're currently down 12.5%, but bear in mind that is only through to September. We're now in November. Now, has the Rhines data came out today? I know it's the 15th, so it probably should come out. Does anybody know? I was too busy preparing for the book launch, so I don't know. I expect when we look at the October data, we will still see a dip in property prices, but probably at a slower degree to what we've seen. You know, I remember, and I think it was May, New Zealand property prices down 2%. June, down 2%. July, down 2%. August, did I get the sequence right? I think I missed a month.
Yeah.
Whatever the
Down.
next month.
Down.
No, it was 1.6%.
Down.
Then it was down another 2%, but more recently, 1.4, 1.3, 0.7. So we're seeing the rate of property price falls, at least around the whole country, starting to taper off. And there is some evidence, for instance, in Tony Alexander's real estate agent insight report that is showing that there are many more first home buyers starting to come back. Over about the last 6 to 8 months, we've seen real estate agents be less negative about first home buyers in the market. We're seeing some other signs that investors had started to come back just before we saw that interest rate hit after inflation spiked again. But no, I think we're in the end game. And I think what you guys need to remember if you're investing in Christchurch is while I just said the market is down 12.5% from November last year through to September 2022, the Christchurch property market peaked in February this year. We're down 4.4%. So sometimes you read the New Zealand Herald, you read stuff and, property prices down everywhere. Upper Hutt, 21.5% down. Oh my God, we've got some staff there. Let me tell you, they're not happy at the moment. But you guys are down less than a fifth of what Upper Hutt is down. So there's variation around the country, and I always think that people have to remember that too.
And actually, that I think therein lies the opportunity as well. So if an area is down 21%, again, it might not be necessarily the lowest point of the market, but it's probably pretty low in the grand scheme of things. So I think there's some big opportunities in New Zealand at the moment.
But there will be, oh, you've got us started now. There's going to be distribution, right? So what I mean by that is there are going to be a lot of people here who are going to be okay. I met one great investor today who's like, I've got lots of properties mortgage free. And I thought, I like you, good on you. You see, property price falls for that person, not going to matter because they're relying on rental income, isn't going to be as significant. Whereas some people who, especially first home buyers, if they use some of the government supported products and perhaps they bought with a 5% deposit in Upper Hutt and then property prices fell 22%, almost 22%, and now they're in negative equity of 17%, yeah, that's going to hurt for some people, and that's where you're going to see the articles and stuff in the Herald talk about those people's stories. But for many people, if you've been paying off debt for a while, you get your higher interest rates, perhaps some of those massive falls or the somewhat larger falls won't be as significant.
And there's a podcast that comes out this week on this.
What is it?
The downturns. How long is the downturn?
Oh, this downturn versus, that's a good one. You should listen to that. Comes out this Monday. Watch it on the YouTube. And of course, just before we wrap up, I've got to tell you, do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really does help us get the message out to more people. Right, we're going to wrap this out up here. We're going to go. We're going to have drinks outside. I want you to...
We need our team to come to the front, maybe, and collect forms.
Oh, yeah. Jake and Holly are going to collect the feedback forms because I'm serious about those. But here's what's going to happen. We're going to fill out our feedback forms. We're going to hand them to Holly and Jody and Samantha. Then we're all going to grab a drink, and I want you to meet somebody you don't know. You're all like-minded property investors, so meet somebody you don't know. We're going to be outside. Grab your books. We're going to sign them. And thank you so much for being here. Thanks, everybody.
Woo!